Welcome to the Deep Dive. You're curious about a topic, you hand us a stack of sources, and for this one, it's multiple heavy-duty systematic reviews, meta-analyses of human trials, and we do the work.
Right.
Today, we are deep diving into cinnamon. It's, one of the oldest spices on Earth, beloved by bakers, and just surrounded by centuries of health claims.
That's right. And the claims are massive. Brain boosts, weight loss, anti-aging. I mean, the list just goes on and on. So our mission, based purely on this high-quality human clinical data you've given us, is to ruthlessly separate that culinary folklore from verifiable, evidence-based clinical fact.
And we have two primary, really essential outcomes for this deep dive. First, we need to pinpoint exactly where the science is strongest. The reliable, maybe modest benefits centered around metabolic control.
And second, and this is non-negotiable for anyone considering using cinnamon daily, we have to deliver a critical, high-certainty safety warning. It's all based on which species of cinnamon you buy.
Wait, really? The species matters that much?
Oh, absolutely. This difference is literally the distinction between a healthy supplement and chronic low-level liver risk.
Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with the strongest claims that the clinical evidence supports. Where do we win with cinnamon?
The victory lap, for sure, belongs to metabolic health, specifically glucose management.
Okay.
The evidence here is just the most consistent and the strongest. It earns a moderate quality rating in the systematic reviews. We are talking about the effect on fasting plasma glucose, or FPG.
FPG, that's the number you get when you wake up, right? Before you've eaten anything?
Exactly. It's a key snapshot of whether your body is struggling to manage sugar overnight.
So when all these trials pool their data, what kind of effect are we actually seeing? I mean, what are the numbers?
We're seeing statistically significant reductions, typically when people are consuming between 1 and, say, 6 grams of cinnamon powder a day. The pooled data shows FPG dropping substantially often in the range of minus 24.6 milligdl up to minus 30 milligdl.
Wait, let's stop there for a second. For our listener who might be pre-diabetic or, dealing with metabolic syndrome, what does a 25 to 30 milligdl drop actually mean in the real world? Is that just a rounding error in the lab, or is that a big deal?
No, that is genuinely clinically relevant, especially if your baseline glucose levels are already poor.
Right.
For someone with type 2 diabetes, bringing that number down by 25 or 30 points is a meaningful therapeutic effect. It suggests improved insulin signaling and a reduced burden on the pancreas overnight.
So the effect is stronger in those who need it most.
Consistently, the data shows the effect is strongest in those with poorer baseline control. So if your HbA1c is already high, cinnamon seems to provide a bigger relative benefit.
Now, you mentioned HbA1c. That's the gold standard, right?
Yeah.
For long-term control over, 2 or 3 months?
Yep.
Does cinnamon maintain that benefit over the long haul?
That's where the nuance comes in. FPG is a short-term win, but the evidence for long-term stability is, well, it's more mixed. Some very recent comprehensive meta-analyses do show a modest reduction in HbA1c, around 2/3 of a percentage point, or minus 0.67%.
That's not nothing.
It's not. But earlier large-scale reviews often found little to no significant overall change. So the conclusion is really that while cinnamon helps with the acute day-to-day management of glucose, we shouldn't rely on it to replace major lifestyle changes or medication for long-term stability.
So great for the daily battle, but maybe not for winning the entire war single-handedly.
Yeah.
That brings us to the why. I mean, how is a common spice doing this?
What's fascinating here is the mechanism suggests cinnamon is working right at the cellular level to manage that glucose without acting exactly like a drug. The active components, particularly these water-soluble polyphenolic polymers, they function as an insulin mimetic.
An insulin mimetic. I like that.
Think of it this way. Cinnamon doesn't create more insulin, but it's like upgrading the Wi-Fi signal between your existing insulin and the door to your cells. It potentiates or enhances insulin receptor activity, which essentially makes your body's own insulin much more effective at ushering glucose out of the bloodstream.
And I remember reading about a specific win right after you eat, the postprandial effect. Everyone knows that sugar spike after a big carb-heavy meal.
That's where the mechanism is almost mechanical, and it shows one of the largest effect sizes in the pooled data. Cinnamon can inhibit specific digestive enzymes in the gut.
Which ones?
Primarily alpha-glucosidase.
Alpha-glucosidase.
Exactly. So when you eat starch, that enzyme is what quickly breaks those complex carbs down into simple sugars ready for absorption.
I see.
If cinnamon inhibits that process, it just slows the entire operation down. It prevents that massive rush of sugar into your system all at once. It blunts the peak.
Which suggests taking it with your meal is probably the best strategy.
Almost certainly. Taking it with, or just before, a high-carb meal is likely the optimal timing to maximize this benefit. You're slowing the sugar roller coaster.
Okay, beyond glucose, better metabolic control often spills over into other areas. So did the sources find improvements in, say, the lipid profile cholesterol and triglycerides?
They did, and this evidence also holds a moderate quality rating. We see modest but significant reductions in total cholesterol, LDL-C. That's the one you want to keep low.
The bad cholesterol.
Right. And notably, triglycerides. The typical triglyceride drops are respectable, often around minus 30 milli-GDL in the meta-analyses.
But you're using words like modest, which tells me I shouldn't ditch my statins just yet. This is a complementary tweak, right?
Precisely. This is a beneficial biological tweak, not a powerful pharmaceutical tool. If you're taking this hoping to drop your cholesterol by 50 points, you're going to be disappointed.
And what about the good cholesterol, HDL?
HDL-C often shows a tiny, sometimes statistically irrelevant increase. The real win here is that reliable reduction in triglycerides and LDL, which seems to be secondary to the better glucose control.
Okay, we've established that cinnamon works for metabolic health. Now we have to pivot to this potential drawback you mentioned, because this is where the supermarket choice becomes a real health decision.
Yeah.
I use cinnamon a lot, especially in baking, and I just grab the cheap stuff. Are you telling me I could be risking my health just to save $1?
This is the high-stakes moment, and it concerns the very common, inexpensive variety you use, which is almost always Cassia.
Cassia.
Yep. We have two main commercial species. First, Cinnamomum verum, that's Ceylon or true cinnamon. And second, Cinnamomum cassia, which is Chinese or cassia cinnamon. That's the overwhelmingly dominant, cheaper spice in most stores.
So what is the critical difference hiding in that jar of cassia?
It's the presence of a compound called coumarin.
Coumarin.
Coumarin. It's a natural chemical, but it's linked directly to hepatotoxicity, liver injury, with high or chronic exposure.
Oh, wow.
And cassia cinnamon contains substantial, potentially dangerously high amounts of it. We're talking 0.7 up to 12.1 milligrams per gram of powder.
Per gram. Okay, and how much does the safe, true Ceylon cinnamon contain?
Ceylon contains only trace levels, 0.004 to 0.04 milligrams per gram.
Wait, say that again?
0.004. To put that into perspective, cassia can contain anywhere from 100 to sometimes over 1,000 times more of this liver-damaging compound than safe, true Ceylon cinnamon. This is the difference you need to know.
That is a powerful and, frankly, scary difference. So if someone wants to use cinnamon daily for the metabolic benefits we just talked about, cassia becomes a clear chronic risk.
It absolutely does. Regulatory bodies like the European Food Safety Authority set the tolerable daily intake, the TDI, for coumarin very low, 0.1 milligrams per kilogram of body weight per day.
Okay, so what does that mean in practice?
It means for a typical adult, just one single teaspoon, about 2.6 grams of cassia cinnamon powder, can easily, sometimes dramatically, exceed that safety threshold for an entire day.
1 teaspoon.
One. So if you're using cassia every day for weeks or months, you are setting yourself up for unnecessary liver strain.
So this is maybe the most critical takeaway of this entire deep dive. If you're seeking therapeutic benefits and you plan on long-term daily consumption, you must source and use Ceylon cinnamon.
Period. Due to its negligible coumarin content.
All right, let's assume we've all switched to Ceylon. Now let's look at practical application. What kind of dosing protocol actually worked in these successful trials?
Okay, so we're aiming for consistency and duration here. If you choose powdered Ceylon cinnamon, the consensus effective dose is about 1 to 3 grams per day.
Okay.
And the best approach seems to be splitting that dose up and taking it with your meals to really maximize that postprandial effect we talked about.
What if a listener prefers a more concentrated supplement, like an extract?
If you opt for standardized extracts, which often concentrate those water-soluble polyphenols, the doses are much lower, typically 120 to 360 milligrams per day.
And you said duration was key.
Yes, this is another key factor, time. The metabolic benefits are not instant. Short-term trials often fail to show results because the body needs time to, upregulate those insulin receptors. The trials that showed success required a minimum of 8 to 12 weeks of sustained use.
So this isn't a quick fix. It's a long-term habit.
It's a long-term habit.
Let's address the secondary claims now. What about using cinnamon for weight loss? That's a massive claim you see everywhere online.
Unfortunately, the evidence there is inconsistent and generally rated as low quality.
Huh?
While some meta-analyses do show a very small, statistically significant mean loss, we're talking less than a kilogram over several weeks, these results are modest at best. And they're probably just secondary to the improved glucose control. We see no reliable, high-certainty data suggesting it significantly reduces body fat mass.
So if your primary goal is dropping 10 pounds, cinnamon is going to let you down.
It is. The benefit here is minimal.
What about blood pressure? Is it a good natural tool for hypertension?
Again, not really. Meta-analyses show clinically marginal reductions. I mean, we're talking 1 to 5 millimole Hg.
That's tiny.
It's so small, your doctor likely won't even measure it, and it's certainly not sufficient to recommend cinnamon as a standalone therapy. The evidence is low quality there, too. Same goes for inflammation. There's some low-grade evidence for a modest reduction in markers like C-reactive protein, but the trial results are all over the place.
Okay, let's tackle the bigger, often more sensationalized claims, brain health and longevity. Does any high-quality human data back up claims that cinnamon improves mood, anxiety, or cognition?
We have to state this unequivocally. The high-quality human evidence is currently insufficient to support those claims.
So all the headlines are just hype.
Any positive signals you hear about improved memory, reduced anxiety are overwhelmingly preclinical. They are observed in animals or in cell culture models, and that information just does not translate reliably into human therapeutic benefits. Not yet, anyway.
And what about the ultimate claim? Aging and lifespan extension.
This is pure speculation based on basic science. There are no human trials testing cinnamon for lifespan extension or reduced mortality, period.
None.
None. Any claim is based solely on laboratory models like worms or fruit flies, where compounds like cinnamaldehyde might extend lifespan by inhibiting cellular aging pathways. That's interesting biological research for sure, but it is not guidance for a human being trying to live longer.
So when we synthesize this entire body of evidence, the functional sweet spot for cinnamon is very, very specific. It's an adjunctive therapy to complement proven treatments for metabolic disease.
Exactly. It complements, it doesn't replace. But before we finish, we really need to circle back to the high-certainty drug interaction warnings. This is vital for safety.
Okay, let's start with anyone taking blood thinners.
Yes. Anyone on anticoagulants, especially something like warfarin, must exercise extreme caution. High-dose cassia cinnamon may potentiate bleeding risk.
Because of the coumarin again.
Precisely. Coumarin itself is chemically related to the precursor used to make warfarin. So if you're taking high coumarin cinnamon and a blood thinner, that combination could significantly increase your risk. A physician consultation is an absolute must.
And since we established cinnamon helps lower blood sugar, what about people already on blood sugar medication?
Right. The glucose-lowering effects of cinnamon are additive to prescribed drugs like metformin or insulin. You risk a double effect.
Which could lead to hypoglycemia.
Exactly. Dangerously low blood sugar. So increased blood sugar monitoring is necessary, and you always tell your doctor if you start supplementing with cinnamon daily.
And our final warning connects back to that liver strain.
Always caution against use if you have pre-existing liver disease or if you're taking other drugs that are tough on the liver, like certain statins. And if you must supplement, this is where the insistence on Ceylon cinnamon becomes doubly important.
That brings us to the final summation then. The evidence stack tells us that cinnamon, specifically the Ceylon variety, is a strong, moderate evidence adjunct therapy for improving fasting glucose and healthy lipids in people with metabolic challenges.
Right.
And that selection of variety is paramount for long-term safety.
And while the measurable effect is surprisingly clear for metabolic health, we should probably end with the critical, unresolved gap in the evidence. The scientific mystery of the how.
The mechanism is still mysterious, even after all this research.
It absolutely is. We know that the compound widely thought to be the most active, cinnamaldehyde, is absorbed and metabolized almost instantaneously by the liver.
How fast is instantaneously?
Its half-life in human plasma is estimated to be only 3 to 5 minutes. It's often entirely undetectable just moments after you consume it. All we can measure are its metabolites.
So the active ingredient vanishes almost immediately.
Right. It's processed and cleared faster than your morning coffee, and yet the metabolic benefits persist and are consistent over long-term 12-week human trials.
So what does this all mean?
Well, it raises a profound question that future research has to answer. Are the clinical benefits truly from that parent compound, cinnamaldehyde, which disappears almost instantly? Or are the benefits actually driven by its metabolites, like cinnamic acid, which lingers longer?
Or something else entirely?
Or perhaps it's those water-soluble polyphenols that don't even get absorbed systemically but act locally in the gut, sending signals to the brain and liver. The point is, despite the clear results, the mystery of how cinnamon actually works in the body is still scientifically unresolved. It does the job, but we're still figuring out the full plumbing.
Fascinating. We know the outcome, but the process remains hidden. You now have the definitive science on this spice. The next deep dive is up to you.